I want to talk to you guys today about what we discussed on Sunday. And on Sunday, we talked about saving money. When it comes to saving money, what we have to recognize is that we have to utilize our budgets. So, when it comes to budgeting, one thing that came up today when I was posting was recognizing that there is a perspective shift that we can possibly use to help us budget better. When it comes to budgeting, one thing that we can consider is not just what we're giving up in this particular moment, but what we're gaining if we do set our budgets. Okay. That being said, let's not focus so much on the now, but the future, right? When it comes to budgeting, one of the things that I used initially when I first started was the sinking funds. Now, I know sinking funds can apply to things like vacations, it can apply to things like cars, TVs, furniture, right? But I was using sinking funds initially just to pay the rent. So it meant that I intentionally split up the cost of the rent into two paychecks instead of one so that I wouldn't be spending a whole paycheck to cover the rent and have to live on, let's say, peas and crumbs for that particular 2 week period so that I could actually make ends meet. So with that being said, sinking funds is a great way to start thinking about budgeting because when you're using sinking funds, you are thinking about what you're trying to accomplish in the near future, right? Or even further down the line. But we're thinking about things that we want to accomplish in 6 months, a year, 2 years, possibly, right? And so sinking funds gives us an opportunity to say, hey, I'm going to plan out saving for this particular venture in time so that by the time it comes, I have all the money that I need to make the purchase and I'll have it in my possession. And I'll do it responsibly such that I won't have this situation where I paid for something that I love having. However, I don't have the means to take care of it because I use my whole paycheck and I need to still eat and hang out and take care of other bills. All that being said, let's focus on the future, right? Whether we're talking about 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years, let's think about what we're ultimately trying to accomplish with our money, especially when it comes to things like investments, right? We want to think long and hard. I hope this is very clear. But yeah, we want to think long and hard about what we're accomplishing with our investments and how they can potentially grow. So I know you've seen apps, I know you've seen computer programs and our websites that show you this is what it looks like to invest this much after this much time. If the market grows by this percentage, this is what you can expect to live on. Now, with that being said, you also have to consider something like what will you actually need? And to our surprise at times, we will actually be living on less when we're in our 50s and our 60s and our 70s than we're living on right now because we have way more responsibilities and more movement such that we have to go ahead and spend a lot more in this current period. So when it comes to spending your money, or rather investing your money, think long and hard about what you're actually going to need in your 60s and 70s and 80s versus what you're having to use right now because you may not need that money at that particular time. Or rather, should I say, you may not need this money at that particular time. All right, so we talked about budgeting, we talked about saving, we talked about using our credit cards, right? Now I know that when it comes to credit cards, we can use them and we also can abuse them. We can overuse our credit cards. And one thing that I started to think a whole lot about once I started to really think more long and hard about investing is that we can find ourselves putting a lot more time on our credit than we need to and finding ourselves in a cycle of debt. And this came up in a conversation that we were having yesterday because someone mentioned having to buy new cars after new car after new car. And while the car is beautiful, while the car looks really good, it has new features, it has new possibilities. You have a new type of paint job, you have a new sound system, you have new AC, you have new heating in the seats, and all these things. Those things are all good. However, you start to recognize I find myself continually paying off cards because as soon as I'm done paying one off, I get another one. And this can be a cycle that we get ourselves in when it comes to credit and debt if we aren't careful. And when it comes to investing, we want to make sure that we're decreasing debt, even eliminating it simply for the sake of putting that money away and allowing it to grow. So with that being said, while credit is good, and while I have great credit and I intentionally have great credit, I want to show you guys how to have good credit. I want to introduce you to people that will help you have good credit. I want you to recognize that having great credit is not the end of the road. You still have to make sure that when you're done working, when you can't work anymore, or when you don't wish to work anymore, that you have the money invested to take care of you and your responsibilities and your needs, if they grow or if they don't, right? All that to say is, let's make sure that we don't get caught into any type of credit or debt trap, trying to make sure that we have the nicest car and or the most recent gadgets in our house and in our possession, because we can find ourselves in a, like what I just said, in a trap around something that was actually meant to possibly help us out. And I say that because the credit industry, it's giving intentional slavery, right? It's giving possibly people intending to keep us in cycles such that we don't get out of debt, such that we don't find ourselves being financially free. And I bring that up because we can think of ourselves being in a debt trap, especially when we can't pay off the debt, right? But we can also think of ourselves being in a debt trap when we can pay off the debt, but we keep getting into more and more of it. And that is a concern as well. I honestly wonder, I don't have a black card, but I wonder, when I think about the rappers and the performers and the entertainers who have these black cards, I wonder, do they use them all the time? Do they need to use them all the time? Are they interested in using them all the time? If they have these limitless accounts, do they actually have an interest in putting everything on credit? They may. However, if they really have the means, they may not. All that to say is, let's not get caught into the debt trap. Moving forward from that, I was talking a lot also about making sure that we don't get ourselves caught up in car leases. Okay, so similarly, right? When it comes to cars, it is great to have a car that is working and functional. And this actually brought up something really important, something that I think it gets lost in some of our conversations about money. And this is this: money has a history with every one of us, and how we feel about what we purchase has a lot to do with what we did have, what we saw, what we didn't see, what we got to experience, and what we didn't get to experience, and the lifestyle that we ultimately want to live, given what we've seen and what we haven't seen. All that to say is that when it comes to making certain purchases like the car or the house or some of the things that are in the house, we may find ourselves saying, I don't care how much it costs. I just want to possess it because I never had these opportunities growing up. And to those folks who feel that way, I completely empathize. I completely understand. And I know I relate. I know I do not travel around the world when I hop on planes simply because I'm very curious about the rest of the world. I am genuinely interested in being around the world because I never got to see growing up a lot of countries. I didn't see friends going to a lot of countries, neighbors going to a lot of countries, my family going to a lot of countries. And I said, I want to be someone who can honestly say I've been around the world. And I want people in my family, my children, my wife, to also be able to experience some of these things so that we're not so connected and therefore limited to the surroundings that we have here in the United States, thinking that the whole world either it surrounds us, or what do they say? The whole world revolves around us, or that we are in this position where we feel like, hey, this is all I really know. Truth is that if we follow, if we manage to travel, we can say there's a lot more out there, and I've seen it, right? And so I do encourage folks to get out there, but I also want to encourage folks to do it responsibly, right? We want to keep our long-term goals in mind, we want to keep our short-term goals in mind, and we want to make sure that even though we are overcoming and we're breaking generational curses, we're breaking cycles, we want to make sure that we're doing it responsibly, because we don't want to just do it for a season, right? We don't want to just do it for a short period of time. And I was traveling, I had a nice car and I had a nice house. I want to say, I do this and this has become my new normal, right? This is what we do. This is what we have. This is who we are with our money, not just in this generation, but for generations to come. All right, all right, all right. Let me stop talking for a second. Okay. So we also talked about investing. We talked about the secret sauces. We talked about the sinking funds. We talked about the credit cards. I want to mention for a second zero interest credit cards. Right. I'm getting to learn a little bit more about this personally as I start to use business credit, and I'm recognizing that there are opportunities out there to use zero interest credit cards. Now, what's great about them is this: they often last for about a year to 2 years worth of time. And so, in that 2 year period, you can move a big debt to another card. You can um, use a lot of money and at the same time not have to worry about it growing because you're able to pay those minimum balances. And you can use that to make more money and bring more income into your household. The thing too is that when it comes to applying for new credit cards, you generally want to apply for cards every 6 months or more. So if you have a card that is good with zero interest for a year or more, and you need to get another one or want to get another one so that that zero interest period does not just die after that 1 year, you can go ahead and apply for another zero interest credit card after 6 months to a year. And it will not have a lot of bearing on your credit, especially because when it comes to business credit will not be affecting your personal credit like having these hard inquiries from a personal account if you have a business, whether we're talking about a sole proprietorship or an LLC. All that to say is do not sleep on zero interest credit cards and recognize that they are out there, especially in this time period where we're recognizing that the economy is not serving every American like it could and like it was. We can utilize these zero interest credit cards to really help us gain more footing with our debt or with the purchases that we need to make with having less consequences because we're using a zero interest credit card for 12 months to 16 to 18 to 21 months. I think the longest one I've seen is a 21-month um, zero interest period on a credit card. So I want you to acknowledge, I want you to know that that's out there. All right. What else did we talk about? We talked about what comes to your mind when we think about budget, what our weaknesses are, right? And um, we also talked about what are some of your concerns. Let me look at this Canva. Let me just go back to the note. I was just on it too. God and money, theme, prayer, acknowledgments, podcast, overspending. We talked about socializing, all right? And I know that for me, socializing can be one of the biggest things that robs me of money that I want to have in my bank account and in my investment account because I really love socializing. I am clearly a more social person. I love hanging out. I want to be at different places. And one thing that someone said that robs them of their money oftentimes is FOMO. And that especially is relevant to things like festivals, concerts, when a lot of people are coming to town that we love, we miss, we never get to see, they're never here. And so we find ourselves paying for those types of things because of FOMO. And I encourage you to acknowledge that those things, one, are there, have possibly a savings account dedicated to certain events that may pop up because you never know when your favorite artist is going to come to town, but recognize that they just might. So have something set aside possibly for that. With that being said, well, we didn't talk much about credit cards. I'm sorry, we didn't talk much about savings accounts. However, we have talked about that previously, where there are savings accounts that we can utilize that will actually grow in interest more than it would be if we just had that money in a regular savings account at a regular bank that's probably down the street or around the corner. All that to say is that we want to look for high yield savings accounts. We want to put our money into those accounts and we want to make sure that we're utilizing those for the sake of growing our money over time instead of just allowing it to sit there. I think the term of the week or the term of the day is going to be growth. We want our money to grow. So we're thinking about investing it. We're thinking about putting it in high yield savings accounts. We're thinking about putting it in CDs, right? We're thinking about putting it in places where it's not just going to sit there. Even when it comes to buying houses, right? Our money doesn't just stay stagnant when we purchase a house, but it does we're renting, when we're leasing, or we're just paying down debt and getting into more debt, getting into more debt. So we want to make sure that we are getting something out of those things. With that being said, I want to bring up the rewards points because rewards points do grow over time. So when we are budgeting and using our credit cards, we can find ourselves having more credit card points over time and getting something back from our purchases rather than just spending money and getting in debt and paying it off, getting in debt and paying it off. That's a cycle that we don't want to find ourselves into for no good reason, right? So when you're looking at credit cards, definitely look for cards that have credit card points. When you're looking at credit cards, definitely think about how much the annual fees are. When you're looking at credit cards, make sure you're thinking about whether or not it's actually going to be useful in your situation. Because you may actually love a certain credit card and love what it offers, but you don't never use Uber. But you ain't never gonna go to that gym. But you don't even shop at that store. You don't even really go to that restaurant, right? So you want to make sure that we're using the cards that make the most sense for our lifestyles and that we don't have to change our lifestyle so much just to fit into the confines of a deal for a credit card. I'll repeat that one more time. Use a credit card that's relevant to your lifestyle because that will be the most beneficial for you. If you have to start shopping new places and going places that ain't by your house, you go in places that you don't even really like their food, you really love eating at these places, and you guys are in the routine of going to those places, then make sure you get a card that works with those places. But don't get a card because it's nice and shiny and heavy, only for the points because you can find yourself going places that you ain't even feeling just to get some points, going places that ain't even really your routine, your culture, your vibe, your style, just to get points. And in time, whether it's a few weeks or a few months, you're gonna stop using that card at those places because those aren't your people, those aren't those aren't the places that you love to frequent, right? So keep that in mind. 100% keep that in mind. Let me see. We had a good amount of stuff out of that one. Buy tickets in advance. Buy your tickets in advance. You want to travel? Buy your tickets in advance as soon as they're available. Or travel as far down the line as you can so that you can buy them for the cheapest cost. The closer that your trip is, the more you're gonna have to pay for that plane ticket. So make sure that you schedule your trips out so that you can get the lowest price for those plane tickets, even for the hotel stays and or transportation. All right. And eating chicken is good. Automate your bills. Automate your bills. Put those things on your cards. Put those things on automation so that you don't have to think about those long and hard. Really? All right. Yes, automate as much as you can. And this even came up with regard to putting money in our employer's account so that we recognize that we're actually saving money before the money even gets to our paychecks in our bank accounts. But we can actually have money taken out of our account, taken out of our paycheck before it hits our paycheck. Consider that. Consider automating that way, but also consider putting your bills on your credit cards. Consider having money transfer from your account to your investment account on a regular basis. Consider automating things so that it's less difficult. But if you're going to automate things, it does not mean that you can start forgetting to check your balances. Make sure that you're checking those because sometimes you think money's going to be there and you forgot that it comes out that day. If you thought money is going to be a certain place and you forgot that it comes out that week. So make sure that you're always checking your credit card balances and your bank account balances so that if you ever are missing funds, if you're ever forgetting what time something comes out, you are reminding yourself. If you have to write it down somewhere, to put it in your phone, make sure you do it. All right. I think we're almost done here. I think we're almost done. Last thing I'll say is budget-friendly activities, okay? If we want to save money, that means that sometimes we're going to need to plan for budget-friendly activities. That means we have to intentionally go places that are cheap to go to and get what we want because we're intentionally trying to save money. So I want to encourage you guys with that. If you are spending money in a fast way at the beginning of your paycheck, make sure towards the end of that pay